My husband was influenced by his mother and insisted on a paternity test for our child. I agreed, but my mother-in-law manipulated the results. I, a 28-year-old woman, have been with my spouse, Mark, 30, name changed for privacy, for 6 years, married for the past 2. I'll start with some backstory. My mother-in-law has never been the nicest person to me, but I usually ignored it, especially at the start of our relationship. I was young and naive, and I imagined that mothers-in-law behaved similarly with their sons. When I moved out of my family's house, I didn't have much contact with them, so I lacked perspective on what a healthy family looked like. I guess the events of the last few weeks have been building up for a while, and now I'm completely lost. I don't know what to do. For reference, when I first met my husband's parents, we were all out to dinner. His mother appeared kind enough at first, but throughout the meal, she made targeted, underhanded comments like, "Do you have a job of your own? Or do you just live off Mark's money?" And, "Have you ever considered losing weight? You have such a pretty face. I think you'd be stunning if you were a little slimmer." She also said, "You're a great girl, but I just don't think I could ever find anyone good enough for my baby boy." I ignored every red flag because I was deeply in love with Mark. She often said these things in a humorous tone, and I didn't want to overreact. For the first several years of our relationship, she frequently made small, underhanded comments about my weight, appearance, or the idea that I was dating Mark for his money. The trouble is, we both work in the same field and earn nearly the same amount. While he earns slightly more, it's far from enough to justify accusations of gold digging. At first, her comments bothered me, so I brought them up with Mark. He repeatedly told her to stop, but because it was never excessive, he dismissed it, saying she's clingy since he's her only child. We didn't see his parents often because we were busy and lived an hour away. When Mark proposed, things escalated. My mother-in-law made our engagement and wedding difficult. When we invited his parents to dinner to announce our engagement, she broke down upon seeing the diamond ring. She asked Mark how much it cost, and flushed bright red when he told her. While the price was reasonable for us given our lucrative careers, she told him I didn't deserve such an expensive ring, and that he had never bought her anything that costly, which she felt she deserved as his mother. She also said she didn't believe he was serious about me after 3 years of dating. Mark told her not to be crazy, but the dinner was ruined, and everyone left shortly after. She didn't speak to him for 3 weeks, but later apologized, saying she was afraid of losing her little man. During wedding planning, she tried to tamper with the guest list and vendors. Yes, she wore a white dress to my wedding. Mark supported me throughout this. We had passwords for all vendors, and he made his mom change her dress. Our first year of marriage was wonderful. We wanted to start a family and began trying for a baby right away. However, everything changed when I became pregnant at the end of last year. We surprised my in-laws with a gift basket containing champagne, chocolate, and a tiny plaque that read, "Grandma." When they opened it and realized what was happening, my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "You sure it's my baby Mark's, right?" I was stunned, but she smiled and acted like it was a joke, and the evening continued. That's when she started making frequent comments about my weight. "You've really put on a few pounds, haven't you? Be careful, or your husband's eyes might start to wander." She added, "I stayed thin during my whole pregnancy with Mark. You should really stop being so lazy and put effort into looking good for my baby." She also mentioned women she knew who had misidentified another man's child as their husband's, always implying I might do the same. She even joked about how she wished I wouldn't do something like that, insinuating I cheated. I hated these comments and constantly asked her to stop. She'd dismiss me saying, "You take things too seriously. Can't you take a joke?" Then she brought up Lauren, 30F, Mark's ex from high school, talking about her skinny, petite figure and how she matched Mark better because they were both athletic. These comments, combined with pregnancy hormones, made me cry several times. At first, Mark would yell at his mother to stop, which only irritated her more. But by the 4th or 5th month of my pregnancy, he became distant. He started visiting, his mother more frequently without me, even on weekends when I begged him to stay because I was sick or in pain. Around my 5th month, he stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings, hugging or touching me at home, and showed no emotion. I was confused, but whenever I asked what was wrong, he'd get irritated, saying I was clingy, annoying, or acting crazy due to pregnancy hormones. I let it go and tried to focus on myself and my baby, but I was sure my mother-in-law was influencing him. When my baby was born 1 month ago, my mother-in-law insisted on being present in the delivery room. I didn't want her there, but Mark said if I didn't allow her, he wouldn't be there for me either. At that point, I was so emotionally and physically exhausted that I gave in and let her stay. Although my labor was long and difficult, holding my baby was the sweetest moment of my life. I'd do it all over again for him. Just after they cleaned him up and handed him back to me, Mark came over and said, "I want a paternity test." I was shocked and thought it was a joke at first, but he was serious. I was completely confused and kept asking why. I'd never cheated on anyone or given him any reason to doubt me. My job was remote, and he worked in the office, so I was almost always at home. My pregnancy was very challenging, so I didn't have the time or energy to even consider an affair. He kept insisting he needed to be sure the baby was his, and didn't want to raise another man's child. Hearing him say those things about our baby broke my heart. I agreed to the paternity test because I had nothing to hide. 3 weeks ago, we got the results. As you might guess from the headline, the results were negative. I thought there had to be a mistake, but Mark refused to even look at me. He packed his things and left for his mother's house, leaving me alone with a 2-week-old newborn. I called repeatedly, but he didn't answer. I texted him, saying there must have been a mistake and suggesting we take another test, but he didn't respond. He finally called me a week ago. By then, I was a wreck and just needed help with the baby. Instead of offering any comfort, he said, "My mother was right. I can't believe I married a woman like you." That's when everything clicked. What did he mean by his mom was right? I realized she must have fed him lies about me having an affair or being immoral, something completely untrue. I decided to call my mother-in-law yesterday because Mark wasn't responding to me. When she answered, I told her I needed to speak with Mark, and that he couldn't just abandon me with a 1-month-old baby after everything I'd been through during pregnancy and labor. She smirked and told me he wasn't home and that I got what I deserved. That was it. I was done with the whole family. By then, I had my baby to think about, and I wasn't going to let them treat him the way they'd treated me. I wasn't going to tolerate her nonsense any longer. I replied, "I don't know what you think of me, but I never cheated. The test was wrong." That was the turning point. She laughed and admitted she had submitted the wrong sample to ensure the results were negative, because, in her words, I didn't deserve her son. She said she refused to let me baby trap him. She went even further, saying, "He will never believe you or put some woman over his own mother, so just let it go." I was stunned. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then she went on a rant about how she always wanted Mark to be with someone good enough for him, someone who matched him in appearance. She brought up Lauren again, saying how much she missed her and how Mark should realize she was the one he was meant to be with. The paternity test was just a ploy to get him to leave me so she could find him a suitable partner. I hung up. Since then, I've been numb. I can't believe a grown adult would act like this. That brings me to where I am now. I texted Mark right after and told him what she'd said. I told him to ask her himself. I'm not sure what to do next. Should I get another paternity test? I'm considering hiring a lawyer, but I don't want to make things more complicated. Should I even take him back if he decides he wants to return? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update. First, thank you to everyone who responded and offered advice. I didn't expect so many people to see this. I went to bed after posting and woke up to 900 comments. I read them all but can't respond to everyone, so I'll address a few questions here. As I mentioned, I'm not close to my family and haven't spoken to my parents in years. They didn't attend my wedding, and I doubt they even know or care about my baby. My family is from Minnesota, but I moved to the East Coast after leaving home. I supported myself through school and college with various jobs. I met Mark in college and have been working remotely since. I don't have many local friends, and my family isn't an option. I reached out to my coworker, Katie, 30F, who lives nearby. We occasionally text, and I told her a bit about what was happening. She was kind enough to offer to come over and help. When she arrived, I was a mess. I hadn't showered in a week. The house was a disaster, and my 2-week-old baby was crying in my arms. I burst into tears when I saw her, which was awkward since we aren't that close. But she was amazing. She asked what was going on, and I couldn't even explain. So I just showed her the original post. Katie has been an absolute sweetheart. She's been taking care of my son while I clean up, eat proper meals, and take my first hot shower in 2 weeks. She's also been a rock for me, and her outrage on my behalf feels validating. Honestly, it's such a relief to finally have someone on my side. That's all for now. Many of you asked about my father-in-law. I didn't mention him earlier because he's not very talkative. I'm not sure what he thinks of me, but he's always been kind, and usually ignores my mother-in-law's behavior. I'm also not entirely sure why my mother-in-law dislikes me so much. But it's not about ethnicity or religion, as some of you speculated. We're all white and not religious. I think it's because I'm a bit bigger and taller, while Mark is very fit and loves working out. I'm not unhealthy. I exercise regularly, but I'm not as petite as my mother-in-law or some of Mark's exes. That's my best guess. I'm planning to contact a lawyer today. At this point, I don't think I'll ever look at Mark the same way again. I know I want a divorce. I've already screenshotted as many messages as possible, both with my mother-in-law and Mark, just in case. I'll also get another paternity test and give him the results when I serve him with divorce papers. He hasn't responded to my texts yet, and at this point, I don't care. I don't want my son to have a father like him. I'm furious that he didn't even talk to me before abandoning me and our son. I don't want him around anymore. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's been a hectic couple of months, and I've received many comments and messages asking for an update, so here's what's happened. It's been 2 months since my last post. Mark returned home about 2 days after. I posted my first update. By then, I had cleaned myself and the house, thanks to Katie, and had consulted a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Mark showed up early in the morning, looking terrible, unshaven, with eyes like he'd been crying for days. I wasn't expecting him. We stood in silence for a moment before he broke down and apologized. I know I said I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, but seeing him in front of me was hard. I'd loved this man for 6 years, and letting go wasn't easy. Hearing him apologize felt good, though. I let him in, and we sat in the living room while I held our baby. He kept crying, and eventually begged to hold his son. The anger from the past few days resurfaced, and I said no. He nodded and let it go. After gathering his thoughts, he asked if we could talk. I agreed because I wanted to hear what he had to say. Thanks to a commenter's suggestion, I remembered to record the conversation on my phone. The truth came out. He didn't want to believe it when I texted him what his mother had said, but it kept bothering him. Finally, he confronted her. Of course, she denied everything, claiming I was trying to baby trap him for money and isolate him from his family. But my father-in-law had had enough of his wife's insanity and told Mark the truth. It turns out one of my mother-in-law's nephews worked at the lab where the paternity test was sent, and she convinced him to switch the results. Mark said it felt like his entire world had collapsed in that moment. He realized what a terrible husband and father he'd been, and how manipulative his mother was. Hearing that felt amazing, but it wasn't the end. The extent of her manipulation was shocking. His mother tried to defend herself by saying I was too big and womanly for her handsome son. She wanted him to divorce me and get back with his ex, Lauren, who she thought was prettier and more suitable. She also hated that Mark was paying too much attention to me and our baby, taking time away from her. Things got worse when he visited her during my 4th month, one of the times I couldn't go. She had invited Lauren, who flirted with Mark constantly. Lauren, who's petite and very attractive, played along, and Mark admitted he fell for his mother's lies. He started seeing Lauren behind my back, enjoying the attention while I struggled through my pregnancy. He claimed they never slept together, only dated and kissed, as if that made it better. He said he ended it a week before I went into labor, out of guilt. After telling me everything, he begged for forgiveness. He said he'd do anything to fix things, even cut his mother out of our lives for good. For a moment, it was tempting. I almost gave in. But then, I looked at my son and remembered everything Mark had put me through over the past year, how he never set boundaries with his mother, how he had an affair, how he abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. I told him that after everything that happened during my pregnancy and after our son was born, it just wasn't possible. I didn't see him the same way anymore, and I couldn't trust him. He cried some more, but eventually agreed to stay at a motel nearby. I also told Mark I wanted to take another accurate paternity test. He protested, but I insisted, so the test was scheduled for the next day. 2 weeks later, the results came back. Surprise, surprise, he is the father. He cried when he saw the results. Is it bad that I felt vindicated? Last week, the divorce papers were finally drafted, and I served him. After 2 months of agony, he was a wreck and tried to suggest couples counseling before making any big decisions, but I was truly done with him. I requested a 50-50 asset split and primary custody, which my lawyer believes will be easily granted given the evidence I have of Mark's behavior toward our baby. Mark will get supervised weekend visits, and his mother will not be allowed near my child. Mark said he won't challenge the terms out of guilt, and honestly, he shouldn't. My father-in-law reached out the day Mark was served to apologize for not stepping in sooner. I forgave him. From what I've heard, he's always been a laid-back guy, and Mark mentioned he's likely to leave his wife. As for my mother-in-law, I have no idea what's going on with her. I blocked her the day Mark showed up at my door. Moving forward, I'll be moving out of our apartment. While I'm heartbroken and overwhelmed by how my marriage ended, I'm also hopeful for the future. That's where things stand now. I probably won't update for a while. It's time to focus on myself and my son. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support. I'm incredibly grateful and wouldn't have gotten this far without it. Update number 3. Wow, I completely forgot about this account. It's been a year since my last post. I deleted Reddit from my phone and kind of moved on. This will be a quick update for those curious about where things are now. My divorce is set to be finalized next month. Mark suddenly decided he no longer wanted to give me majority custody or agree to supervised visits, so the process dragged on. But my lawyer was amazing, and with the recordings I have of Mark admitting his behavior during and after my pregnancy, I have a strong chance of getting what I want. My baby is now 14 months old and the sweetest little boy. We moved across the state to a charming little apartment, and thanks to my job, I can spend most of my time with him. I've also started going out more and joined a book club, so I've met some new people here. The divorce, relocation, and raising my son on my own have been tough. But honestly, I feel so much better without Mark and his witch of a mother ruining my life. I should have seen the red flags earlier, like how he always prioritized his mother over his pregnant wife. But you live and learn. I won't make that mistake again. What's next? I'm not sure if I'm ready for another relationship, but for now, I just want to be as present as possible for my son. I don't think I'll update again, but I want to say I'm in a much better place than I was a year ago. Thank you to everyone who wished me well. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.